I think our guest, she can tell you if that matches up with her research and analysis of what happens in tragic arrangements under racism, white supremacy. So thankful to be doing the program. Joining us for today's broadcast, she is the author of the book, Pieces of a Puzzle, the one thing black females will not talk about. Joining us live, our guest, Miss Renethia Tate. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for being willing to share some of your time with us. As I told you, we have quite a few listeners. They are familiar with your brilliant work, and they were super excited to have you on the program, as am I. Just cannot be more thankful. For those who have not yet heard of your work, people, this might be their first time hearing from you. Could you give us just some information about who you are, anything you think would be helpful as we proceed with the discussion?
Well, I wrote a book that took me about 6 years to write, and the subject matter is sex and race. And that was a subject matter that was on my mind while I was in college. I was always interested in the race problem, the race issue. So I was doing research back while I was in college, and then I ran up on Mr. Neely Fuller, who wrote the book, The United Independent Code System. And that was part of my research, and that's really how my research began. After I started reading his book, I started asking a lot of questions about race and racism. And of course, there was a chapter in the book that dealt with black females. And that's where I started to, at least start the research. My research started based on the fact that there was some information that was already out there saying that black females is a subject that we will not talk about, and that subject dealt with white men. And so this is how it all started. Hello?
Yes, ma'am. We will get more details on that as we... Oh, did I interrupt you? Did you have more that you want to share?
No.
Okay. We'll get more details on how this came together and what you've been able to conclude from your analysis. For listeners who haven't seen you or don't know much about you, you are a black female, is that correct?
Oh, yes, I'm a black female, and I went to Howard University, and that's and my research started in Washington, D.C.
This program, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of white supremacy racism. I use those two terms as synonyms, same definition for both terms. The definition that I use for white supremacy racism is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that's an accurate definition?
Yes, it's an accurate definition. We are under the system of white supremacy. Of course, it's a system that's been operating long before I was born, but it is a system. And under the system of white supremacy, we are victims of racism. That means we are subjugated to white people. We have to do what we are told. Even though it's 2012, everything is just high tech. But racism still exists.
Very important point to keep in mind anytime there are discussions really about any area of people activity, but especially things that go down in the bedroom. Very important. Keep that in mind. Okay, just get some more background on how this whole topic came together. Your book, Pieces of a Puzzle. You write in the book, and I thought this was fascinating because I've heard this before. I was hoping that you could tell them about the phone call that you had with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., where you had been talking with him. You all had been speaking about his book and his views on white supremacy, and there came a point where he asked you a question. Can you go into more detail about that conversation and what transpired?
Yes. He asked the question, have I ever slept with a white man? And at that time, at the time that he asked that question, I hung up the phone on him because I had buried the situation, the experience in the back of my mind. So when he asked that question, it's just my natural reaction was to hang up. And then after I hung up, I called him back and told him that I had experience with a white man, and he hurt me. And he merely said, I thought so. And so this is how, this is part of the research too, but that's how I met him. When I met him, he asked that question because this is the one thing that black females will not talk about. I didn't talk about my experience either. I was quiet, but not knowing that I had buried it in the back of my mind. So the experience that we have with white men are sometimes buried. Just like my experience was buried in the back of my mind. Other black females who are not talking about it, it's not an everyday subject that we can just talk about. So it is the one thing that black females will not talk about. And like I said, and that's for many reasons that I found in the research. Most of us have not, I'm not going to say most of us, but we have had experiences that are embarrassing. We had experiences that makes us feel guilty. And we have had experiences that traumatized us, that we have buried in our minds.
Mesdames et messieurs,